into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, 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 not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
All right, greetings, the damned. My goth socialist podcast audience has demanded that we call them the damned.
Yes.
So, hello, the damned.
You must wear black now.
Listening to this in your coffins or whatever. Hello, welcome to Pod Damn America this week. I'm Jake Flores. Here is Raghav Mehta.
Hey, what's up?
Alex Patak.
The damned.
It's funny, Jake's reading our names right now.
And it says your name is Rajav. Okay.
Yeah.
Odd job. Pronounced odd job.
Been here for 2 years.
And special guest this week, journalist Kate Aronoff.
Hello.
I get that right?
That's right.
Cool.
Aronoff. A Russian name.
Suspicious, I know.
Welcome to the show. Kate will be talking with us about her work studying the EPA, climate change, etc., a number of other things. Before we get right into that, a couple of announcements up top. If you lost access to the show in the great Patreon purge that happened a month or two ago, I got an email back from Patreon. They basically told me to go suck a dick. So I'm really sorry. Email me, and I'll just send you directly the files until we get this cleared up.
Well, did you try doing that? Because maybe that will fix things.
Try doing what?
Sucking a dick.
Oh. Yeah, nothing happened.
Every time.
God.
I followed your steps. I look like an idiot.
Yeah. You're not. This person doesn't work for tech support at all.
The Patreon Purge is my least favorite Purge movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's the worst. It's like 30
Agreed.
minutes long.
Very uninteresting.
Another thing regarding Patreon, a number of people have reached out to me and told me that they can't find our Patreon on the search bar, through the search bar, and have to then type www.patreon.com/poddamnamerica into their address thing.
This is real.
And it's very inconvenient. So I looked into this, and it's because we are classified as not safe for work. So you can't search a Patreon where they say curse words and talk about sucking dicks and stuff.
It's like the deep web of Patreon?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not
Patreon.
indexed on Patreon.
We're dark.
How are we not safe?
Patreon
How is a podcast
intellectuals.
not safe for work?
I bet everyone who listens to this is listening to it at work.
I hope so.
That's a fact.
Yeah. So I guess we could fix that if we were to take that marker off our show.
Clean it up, fellas.
But then someone
Clean
could
it up.
get mad at us for the dick sucking stuff. So I don't know. We're in a cycle here. We're kind of stuck in a loop.
This is why we didn't get into Aussie Fest.
Yeah.
Because of that tag.
Yeah, because we're NSFW, man. So I don't know. Maybe we'll try and fix that. Maybe we'll try to get away with, blatant copyright infringement of music and lying about not being NSFW, so that you can use your search bar. I don't know. But until then, just type the words in. The damned.
Make
you guys
us
still
safe
like
for
me?
work. We
Um,
are fully clothed.
That's pretty much Patreon business for the week. Thank you very much for for all of our new subscribers. We just had a little bit of a kick. Pretty cool. So I'm stoked to keep making this podcast and yada yada yada. Other than that, I don't really have a whole lot of news this week. I missed Elon and Grimes last week. They unfollowed each other on everything and basically had a big three-way meltdown online with Azalea Banks. That was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, apparently Elon and Grimes were on a 2-day acid bender and we're working on some sort of project with Azalea Banks, who's also
I blacked
insane.
this story out. I think I saw it at some point.
Good
and
for
I just
you.
avoided it from my memory.
There's just definitely a type of story where you look at your phone and you're just like, nah, this is too much.
Wait, I've never met any of these people. What does this mean?
Yeah. I don't know, but if they break up, it's going to ruin my couple's costume for Halloween.
And I'm going to be Azealia Banks.
Oh, yeah. Also, I'm late to the party here, but I watched This Is America, and it fucking rules.
It's Who is America?
Who is America?
I have made the same mistake several times.
I watched something. Oh, yeah. I watched the Childish Gambino video. No.
It's good.
I was like, this is hilarious. Sacha Baron Cohen's insane. You can't even tell it's him. I know. No, the Sacha Baron Cohen show is fucking great. I heard that Mullen, quote unquote, wrote on it.
He consulted.
He consulted on the episode where a guy takes his pants off and yells the N-word, and I was like, is that the part that you consulted on? That seems like something you would write.
That was
it's
big.
like, did they just call you when you were half awake or something?
Just say the N-word.
Boop. He just hangs up the phone. Anyway, yeah, that shit's great. So props to those guys. Also, our pal AMLO in Mexico just unveiled his incoming cabinet, and a lot more women than Peña Nieto's, so that's pretty cool. Although the jury's still really out on AMLO. I'm really curious to see what happens with this guy, because everyone in Mexico seems to be like on the edge of their seat. Like, is he gonna go crazy? You know?
Your move, AMLO. Do some clown shit.
Yeah. But anyway, welcome to the show, Kate. Kate Aronoff, writer for In These Times, The Intercept. We just read a bunch of your work regarding climate change and how it relates to things like immigration and like the DHS and our overall, need to restructure our economic system. It was very interesting.
All the uplifting stuff.
Yeah, no. Anytime you're reading about climate change, I tend to get really depressed because it seems very unsolvable.
That might just be a you
Yeah,
thing.
you're not alone.
Yeah, Alex.
Well, we are a goth
I'm
leftist
just fucking with
podcast.
you.
So it's
I'm a
apropos.
goth now, dude. I don't fucking follow the rules.
We're climate goths.
Climate goths. I made a smoke.
Oh.
Yeah, surprisingly, the subject of the climate, which covers the entire world, actually ties in to a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
It's really
how
narrowed
that
down in the
works.
media.
Yeah.
So I thought like the exciting reason we're having you on today is all of the new EPA administration rules about coal. And I was also just thinking about like what the EPA means to people in popular culture. Like when you bring the EPA up to Americans, the only recognition you're going to get from most people is like that they want to get rid of the Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters.
Yeah, where the
hats
EPA were the bad
They
guys.
were the
Yeah.
villains in
Yeah.
Ghostbusters.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it was
right.
weird.
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
It's
God.
ghosts and big government stopping Ghostbusters.
Mhm.
I think E.T. as well. There's all these movies from like the 80s where the villain is just like scientists and like public workers and shit. Really weird
80s
angle.
were wild.
Yeah.
They don't understand how to be a friend.
Yeah. I guess it was like Reagan's, era, and there might be some weird thing you can glean from that. But the EPA is interesting. My personal relationship to it is that my dad works for the EPA. He has for a long time, and he's a laboratory auditor. I think my mom is sort of convinced that, like, for my entire childhood, she kind of had this weird theory that he was actually like some sort of fucking secret CIA agent, and I'm like,
Embedded
Oh,
within
okay.
the EPA.
but I think both of my parents are just insane.
Those are two very different things. Go on.
But I've talked to him about it before, and he audits laboratories and like tests water and stuff like that. And he sent me a picture when he was working in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina that was really interesting. Like, apparently something that happened out there was that since this hurricane destroyed all these houses, flooded all
damn.
these houses. What happens when your home is flooded that bad is that it ruins your refrigerator. So they had to get rid of all these refrigerators. They're not like salvageable. You can't really clean it and turn it back into a regular refrigerator. So there's just this refrigerator graveyard outside of New Orleans in Louisiana that's just like refrigerators for as far as the eye can see. They're all busted up and shit, and they look
Just
like tombstones, you know.
And it's still there.
This happened he sent me this in 2005 or 6 or whatever the
It's
hell
a
it happened.
popular hide and go seek area for children now.
I don't know. I couldn't say whether it is or
FEMA
not.
took care of it.
Let's go here, son.
Yeah. Well, New Orleans, they're just dancing on top of them and shit, and listening to bounce music and stuff.
That's what the next season of True Detective's going to be about. Is the refrigerator graveyard.
They say the Komodo cold, and I'm about to find out how cold.
But anyway, yeah, these new EPA deregulation laws just rolled out today. Is that correct?
That is right. Early this morning.
Yes, there's a new chief in town as of a few months ago, Andrew Wheeler.
Andrew Wheeler.
Around when did he step in?
He stepped in, a couple months ago after Scott Pruitt was ousted.
Our man Big Scott, who was ousted for opening his own personal parade.
So much corruption.
Yeah.
It's incredible how I didn't realize one person could.
He also tried to
Beat
launch a Lamborghini into space.
And also very
Failed.
bad at it, too. Nakedly bad at it.
Yeah, just bad. You would think if you're that corrupt, you would get good at some point at
Yeah.
doing the corruption, but he just continued to sort of be horrible at doing it. My favorite story was when somebody had to basically break into an apartment, his security detail. He was napping, and they thought he was dead or in danger or something, and so they had to ram down this door to Scott Pruitt, and he was napping.
He was just in a food coma in there.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, that rules. Well, I like him for fucking off on the job, but that's it. Wrong job to fuck off on, I suppose.
You gotta wonder, if his end goal was EPA justice, and he's like, I'm here, just have fun with it now, There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, he got replaced, and this new guy came in. Kate wrote a wonderful article in these Times, arguing that, that could be even more dangerous to have someone who's not a cartoon bear falling down the stairs in charge of the EPA and is still a Republican. And, it was! We have a whole host of new regulation on coal. Got the New York Times open here. Headline. We're looking at it right now. Cost of new coal rules. Up to 1,400 more deaths a year. Which is more. I always try to go for less deaths in my numbers whenever I can.
I like how the graphic on that article is just terrifying, gloomy smokestacks. Future looks terrible.
Right. And I know this is breaking news, so it's kind of hard to get a cutting edge thing on this. But Kate, you've been covering the EPA in the last few months. What other fun developments have we had in our Environmental Protection Agency under Trump?
Well, it's a real redirection of the agency, and so I think there is this narrative that the EPA, Scott Pruitt, and now Andrew Wheeler were kind of degrading the institution and trying to destroy it, but I think they're actually just doing different things with it, which is propping up coal companies and really leveraging the EPA in the interest of coal companies, oil companies, gas companies. And I think the regulations that came out today are kind of clear about that. There's this great graph or table that the EPA put out, which compares the Clean Power Plan, which is the set of regulations, Obama-era regulations that this new ACE plan is replacing, and does a side-by-side comparison of it. And on the Clean Power Plan side, it says intervenes on behalf of renewable energy, and then the flip side of that with ACE is stays out of energy markets or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
then
they can be efficient.
Yeah, and then later on it says keeping, in terms of what this new regulation matrix does, keeping coal plants open. So it's really just looking to nakedly prop up coal companies, and that's something that Scott Pruitt did in Oklahoma, kind of, using government on behalf of industry. And so it's not quite that they're just stripping regulations, it's that they're really reshaping the regulatory state in the interest of the fossil fuel industry.
But can't we use coal in a good way? Do something fun with it.
I heard they can make it clean.
I would love that. That would be really great, and we can still get our fun jobs going down with big pickaxes like in Zoolander and hitting the sides of the walls, because that's what we wanted.
Every morning I shower in a big shower of clean coal.
My only
Gets me so clean.
My only desire to ever be in the White House press corps, which seems like utter hell, is just to get to ask someone what clean coal is.
Yeah.
I want nothing more.
Yeah, it's one of those phrases they throw around that's like just like not real.
It's meaningless. I mean, there is like kind of a scientific definition of clean coal. I mean, it's mostly like industry nonsense, but I just would really love to watch like Sarah Sanders try to explain what clean coal is, or Trump himself. Like,
Yeah.
just be golden.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone could do it, like she could. That's kind of her shit. Is just like improving shit like that and like making it up with a little diagram.
No eye contact. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. So Wheeler, I mean, is he pretty much a continuation of Pruitt, or are there differences in his policies?
Worse, I think.
Worse,
in some
right?
sense.
There's something that struck me about this. I remember when Pruitt got fired, there's always this like neoliberal short-sightedness where everyone's like, "Hell yeah, it's being taken down," and like no one really even assesses the person coming in as like being possibly worse. And I think, as maybe I might have, if I read this right, you might have pointed out, like less obvious in how he's bad, like less of a big tottering disaster, spectacle type of thing, like the more of the insidious, like somehow
like a more banal evil. Yeah, I mean, he is in some ways more competent than Pruitt in the sense that he was at the EPA for a long time, and so people kind of relate to him as being the sort of insider within the agency. And he was also a registered lobbyist for the coal industry until like last spring. In these times, we published early this year a sort of look at these pictures that had been leaked to us from the Department of Energy showing Andrew Wheeler at the table with Robert Murray, who is the executive of Murray Coal, there as a lobbyist. So it's those two meeting with Rick Perry at Energy.
Right. Another reason this story is close to my heart is I'm from Texas, and Rick Perry was our fucking idiot governor for a long time, and close friend to a lot of male sex workers that I know. Working in the downtown Austin area. Yeah, it's an open secret.
Rick Perry?
Rick Perry. This is an open secret in Austin. It's crazy. Like, friends will talk about. There was this gay bar.
Do explore.
This is a gay bar called Charlie's. It's like right across from the fucking Capitol. And you go in there and they'll all tell you, like, yeah, he comes in here, like, oh, he's called me before, etc. I don't know how it isn't really like that big of a story. And also, I mean, it's
because of all the other things he's saying.
Yeah, right.
That's what probably
what it is. And also, yeah,
Wow.
who cares? And also, there's just so many like.
That is fascinating. I mean, that's like the least bad thing.
Right.
That's like not a.
Yeah.
It depends. Apparently, there's also like just an open secret. I know people in Indiana say the same thing, and I guess it's not that much of a story because it's like really like. What's the story? Is it bad that he's gay? No, it's just like what's going on there or whatever. But anyway, Rick Perry's a fucking moron.
Does he like
no
go off on anti-gay stuff, or that's just like
I mean,
he'll throw some love over there, but mostly it's like I made of oil.
Yeah,
I watched the show Dallas and I lived it.
Well, he was very like pro-family, Christian values and all that shit.
Oh damn.
Yeah.
What's bad is if you're gay with a Russian.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what matters.
If I'm reading my Twitter timeline correctly, then that is apparently
Double Jeopardy is what it's called. It's called Double Jeopardy. I don't know. The thing about Wheeler and Pruitt is they're like Trump vampires, and they've been let into the gates of the castle, and we know what they're doing. They're kind of just wreaking havoc and openly gutting everything and selling it out. And so, like, it's infuriating, but it's very easy to understand. And reading your stuff, the element that kept getting to me, as it always does, is mainstream Democrats' reaction to the EPA getting dismantled and kind of just plan for climate going forward. I don't know if...
Yeah, I mean, the kind of crazy thing about watching the Pruitt stuff is that most of the mainstream coverage and even sort of Democrats, what they were talking about, wasn't actually what Pruitt was doing. It was not the sort of like battery of horrible anti-science, openly destructive policies that he was pushing forward. It was like, he spent all this money on a door or like a phone booth or something. It's like, yeah, I guess that's bad, but also is furthering the end of human civilization.
Yeah, they're always so like fixated on like the politeness and the vulgarity and things like that.
Right, it's like he's defacing the office.
Yeah, my favorite thing when he got taken down was I don't know why these nerds bother me so much, but like the science march type people that do like that clap 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 thing. What do we want? Peer-reviewed studies or whatever. I don't know why that bothers me so much, because it's just missing the point by like a hair.
When do we want it? In a timely but sufficient manner.
Because
they're
it's
reaching
like
the masses.
They want the academic process to happen, correctly and by the rules, but they don't care where the gun is pointed, like where the actual policy. Because the problem is not whether they're doing this thing efficiently. It's like what they're doing,
Well, those are always big marches, and so you just get to look at a huge crowd of people just miss the point. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's what turned me into a goth socialist, man.
Yeah. And, dancing with just like your shoulders stiff and your legs bouncing.
How else are you supposed to dance?
There's no other way. You look down. So I guess to further elaborate on the Democrats thing, the extra frustrating part is that as a party, we seem split as to whether we're willing to not only prioritize climate change, but even like admit it's important at all. And you get a lot of mainstream Democrats backing these policies that are all of the above climate policies. Would you like to go into those for a little bit?
Yeah. There was some news on this recently. So all of the above, to give kind of a very brief history of that phrase, was something I believe was invented by industry and used by Democrats until fairly recently. So as recently as I think 2014, Obama said all of the above. We support all of the above in this like big speech he gave on clean energy in DC. And it was in 2016, thanks to Bernie Sanders delegates at the Democratic platform committee meetings in the lead up to the DNC in Philly, that it got taken out. So the Democrats officially sort of parted with all the above language. And just like a week ago, the DNC, which had said it would stop taking donations from corporate PACs linked to fossil fuel companies, passed something basically just going back on that, in which it reinserted this language of all of the above. So what that means is basically we like solar, we like wind, we also are very open to coal and natural gas.
Coal curious.
Yes, coal curious. Yeah.
I like having a house. I also like being crushed by an anvil when I pass under the highway.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Right. And there's
curious about fracking, looking for a third.
And there's this real narrative among Democrats where it's, the party line at this point is like, we believe in climate change, we believe in science and truth and all these things. But
there should be a tax benefit for climate change.
Right. It's like, if we could administer this through a tax credit, then we'll solve it. But I think there's a real sense that you can sort of like tinker your way around it, that you can just like, pass enough tax credits, tax carbon or something like that, like pass all these market-based incentives and then that'll do it, without really looking at what the science is actually saying, which is we need to transform the economy.
There seems to be this like point we're hitting with climate change where you have to just be in full denial in order to like continue thinking that there is not a like a weird like narrowing end of this tunnel. I think about that a lot because I listen to this Bernie Sanders podcast. He has a podcast, by the way. No one ever talks about this.
That's right.
He has a podcast, and he brought on Bill Nye, the science guy, or as he's known now, Professor Bill Nye or whatever. But he,
Bill Nye, MD.
Bill Nye comes on, and he's talking about this, and he's talking about this capitalist question. And I remember listening to it and like feeling really bad for him because he was so frantic and panicky, and he was trying to convince anyone listening to the podcast that no, we can solve this problem through capitalism. We can.
Bill Nye was saying that?
Bill Nye was saying it, and it sounded like
childhood is crushed.
He didn't really even believe it. He was just like, please, like, you gotta like get on board with us, and he was just like desperately trying to get anyone to still buy into climate research and stuff, because he's so, I guess, convinced that we're not going to redirect the overall social structure, the economic structure of capitalism, that he's just like, no, we can do it. You can make it to where incentives cause like better, lower emissions, etc., or whatever. But he just sounded like he was ranting about the end of the world. It was really weird.
That's so sad.
Yeah, and I think that to prove like that point, like is something that illustrates it really well in one of the articles that you wrote was about the World Bank Climate Summit in Germany and how there were all these strange, new companies unveiling like cryptocurrencies that function as carbon credits and stuff like that. And particularly this one story made me laugh about the refrigerator company because can you explain exactly what happened there?
Yeah. So there. This gets really sort of like in the weeds really quickly, so I'll try to do the easiest version of it. Basically, there was a system set up under a kind of previous regime of climate policymaking where companies and countries could purchase these things called offset credits. And so how you would get an offset credit, or how it kind of works, is that you pollute a certain amount and then you can buy an offset, which sort of is meant to balance out your pollution with like a thing that's good somewhere else.
Cardi B's done that.
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I get the pop culture references.
Yeah.
We're very cool.
This is a cool podcast. It's about refrigerators. It's really good.
No, it'll spice up this refrigerator story I'm about to tell. So there are these offset credits, right? And so a company can sort of sell offset credits on the market if it is proven to be doing something good. And so what happened as part of this whole regime is that companies which produce refrigerators produce these things called HFCs, which is a certain type of greenhouse gases. And at some point they figured out that if they destroyed HFCs, that they could sell offsets on the market, on carbon markets. And so they just started making HFCs in order to destroy them. And so just producing all of these extra greenhouse gases that would not have been produced otherwise, and then destroying them on purpose, and then making money off of them.
So this
market
system,
efficiency.
The system was set up to redirect like incentives to where like, hey, if you're producing greenhouse gases, we'll give you a little credit if you then destroy the greenhouse gases. But then someone just figured out, oh wait, I can just on purpose create these gases and destroy them as a way of like hacking the credit system.
It's disrupting.
It reminds me of some shit you would pull in like a video game and everyone would get really mad at you while you're playing like Civilization or something.
It's wave dashing climate change. It's very important.
Who determines if it's good, and is it ever good?
There's a UN agency that did it. Yeah.
That's
I mean, the World Bank right now, or the EU, is sort of phasing out the use of offset credits because it's so like insanely vulnerable to grift, just like everyday, hucksters kind of making their own credits. But yeah, there was sort of like a UN provision, I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but which would certify these credits.
Everything about this event was very funny. The name is Innovate for Climate, one word with the number 4.
And a hashtag. It's a hashtag.
Oh, the hashtag is before the whole thing, so you
Yeah.
can't even really say it in human words.
That's how you name a boy band in the 90s with the like numbers meaning letters and shit. Innovate for climate.
Or an indie band now.
Yeah, it's like how Tupac would name his green gas initiatives project. And so that's very funny. There's a paragraph in here about a climate coin, like Bitcoin, but for saving the world.
Yeah, from what I could understand, their idea, it's like a startup, was that they were creating the first ever cryptocurrency tied to offset credits on the blockchain.
Oh man, that's so uninteresting.
Which makes a lot of sense for
Crazy.
everyone listening.
Yeah. Speaking of Bitcoin, there's an article that came out this week about like the new terrifying amount of energy that's required to just sustain the blockchain that fuels Bitcoin. The best I can understand how Bitcoin works is the blockchain is like this sort of series of computers that all keep each other in check, which keeps the cryptocurrency from being able to be like hacked and manipulated or whatever.
It's computers watching computers.
Yeah. So it is a bunch of think about a bunch of deep blue style computers, like monitoring each other. So like just in a big room staring at each other, making sure nobody does anything, right? That's like it. For some reason, it takes these huge fucking computers, right? And I mean,
the prequel to Westworld.
Yeah, where the robots don't fuck.
You can't see, but the computers are having sex.
Yeah,
that's how they do it.
They play chess and they fuck each other, and they monitor each other so that some guy's Bitcoin account doesn't get hacked. But yeah, so I remember reading a while back, like maybe 6 months ago, that it had reached like the equal to about 16 countries, just the amount of energy they produce. Obviously, small countries or whatever, but that's still very alarming, and it's growing at an alarming rate. This new estimate is that what was the number? It's like. Okay, yeah, it says here in this article by Alex Hearn in The Guardian, the cryptocurrency uses as much CO2 a year as 1 million transatlantic flights.
Still a lot. They're putting up good numbers, and we're happy with where the project's going. I can't wrap my mind around this. I don't understand.
No, the more I read about this stuff, the less it makes sense to me.
I'm very confused.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why it exists and why there isn't more talk of just straight up banning it.
It also seems like such a like a powder keg of a system, because someone could just pull Fight Club shit and just blow up a bunch of these computers. Then what happens to this entire supposedly...
Jake, don't say that on the mic. They listen to us.
Right.
Jake is just begging the DHS to come back to his apartment now.
Well, does the DHS like cryptocurrency, though? I'm going to get like Fedora nerds this
Maybe
time.
Someone in the DHS does.
It only takes one.
Allegedly, this could happen. Theoretically. I'm not saying it should happen. I'm just saying it's so weird that it seems like such a delicate thing to store the backup of all of this entire economic system in. Really weird.
It's just if it did happen, it would be funny. That's all we're saying.
That's all we're saying.
End of discussion.
Nothing.
I have no comment.
I don't mean anything I say on this podcast.
This is an ironic podcast.
Yeah.
We can't reach Jake emotionally.
Tyler Durden is in here.
Okay, but that's what markets and liberal solutions are up to in stopping climate change. They seem like they're doing a great job. There's fantastic strides.
We're almost there, guys. Yeah.
We're almost
Yeah.
there. We're like one more app away, I think, from fixing the problem. You had an interesting interview with Will Steffen, who's the co-host of the now infamous Hot House Earth paper recently on The Intercept. That was strangely counter to everything we've been talking about, the people doing at Innovate for Climate, where he pretty much directly says we would have to fundamentally change the economics of how humans operate, and if we have any chance at all from stopping this.
Yeah, without prompting. I mean, I was interested in this study because I cover this stuff, but I asked him, I think the first question was something like, so what does this mean? If we believe this, then what do we have to do about it? Without any, I didn't ask him this at all. Just says, oh yeah, neoliberalism is totally out of sync with what we need to do on climate.
Is
Cool.
this a scientist or like a social scientist?
He's everyone in that paper describes himself as an Earth system scientist, but he is not a social scientist. He's
Okay.
a natural scientist, and is not
Those people
like
never say that kind of stuff.
no.
Maybe he
Well,
listens to
yeah.
Chapo Trap House or something.
No, what's interesting about climate science, though, is that a lot of papers now, it's fairly standard for them to have this kind of prescriptive part at the end after they get to their scientific findings. And the prescriptive part is almost always something along the lines of, we need to fundamentally transform the productive capacity of society. It's always this
If we could only get
outrageous
people to
stuff.
read the last paragraph.
Well, to that point, I just I a long time ago was trying to become a fucking science person in college, right? And to me, I think there always seems like there's this inherent gap between scientific papers and journalism, because the function of a scientific paper is just sort of flatly objective and kind of has this very plain open for interpretation. Here's the data. Here's what it maybe implies.
But it's so
etc.
cautious too.
But with journalism, you tend to take those and you throw all that caution to the wind, and you sort of manipulate it and spin it in a way that is loud and banging and has a point and gets people riled up and angry and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, with the papers, the bias is completely removed for the most part, and then a journalist is like, well, I have in the pursuit of so-called objectivity. It's like, well, let's see what the executive at Raytheon thinks about this, so
Right.
we can be fair.
Right. There's motivations like that, and then there's also like I always get really mad at these like clickbaity articles that were like, a study proves that if you eat chocolate, you're gonna live for 100 years or something like that. And
you can prove any of your internal biases now.
if you actually look at the studies that they cite, they're not that. They're just somebody who took that, and it's like, okay, there's this strange static that happens in between something being, thought of in the scientific community and then the way it gets told to the public.
And all of the coverage around this paper in particular, like every headline was like, we are doomed. Like,
Yeah.
we are going
It
to
was
die
like,
no matter what we do, which was not at all what the paper said.
No, there's
It
one
was
very
like-
specific thing we could do and will not do.
Right.
It was like Daria, Sick Sad World, that scary TV show that's always just like, meh. Yeah, so the Hothouse paper. I really like that name too. It sounds like
Which is not the name of the paper. The name of the paper is something like totally arcane and academic.
yeah, I liked how they like have a nickname for it that makes it sound like a SoundCloud rapper or something.
If you like Hothouse Earth, subscribe, support artists.
Yeah.
It's getting hot where you are. I don't know. Well, because there is obviously a method of, preventing this future we're all terrified of, and it's very obvious what it is, and people studying this all are saying the same things. But this is the part that gets depressing to me because there's no actual momentum building in a significant way that I can see that seems like you wrote here, he said that we would have to decarbonize by mid-century at the absolute latest if we had any chance of moving forward, which can be done, but politically seems very scary. And I don't know what in this subject gives you hope in terms of like grassroots stuff. Is there anything that maybe people are missing out on?
Yeah, well, I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago looking at the climate plans from folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, from Rashida Tlaib, from folks like Abdullah Sayed and Kanyela Ng, who, both of them, of course, didn't make it to office. But there is a sort of new wave of particularly younger, very sort of left-leaning, some of them DSA-endorsed politicians who are putting out climate plans that actually are sort of at the scale of the problem, or at least approaching it. And so all of those folks have called for a Green New Deal, so to create sort of massive employment projects to do some of the things we need to do on climate, like electrify huge parts of our grid, scale up renewable energy.
A war on planes.
A war on planes, yeah.
The way you described it in one of these articles was like the military footing for America going into World War II is like a controlled economy where everyone's making ships all of a sudden, and we need to be doing that for solar panels last year. I support the idea so much, and I would just love to see it catch on any more than it is right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, right, like there may theoretically reach some point in which the GOP and which very conservative actors are just unable to continue pretending this isn't a problem. Mm-hmm. Once we have like horrible hurricanes hitting New York and like major centers of capital every year, which is a thing that could happen. Yeah, once it threatens capital, like people will come around. And so I think one sort of way to confront that is like a sort of egalitarian redistributive approach, which is like we preempt some of this stuff. We understand that this is coming and we act to prevent it. The other is a totally sort of dystopian like hellscape in which like Republicans control the answer to the problem and just like expand ICE to be the entire U.S. military, and sort of block climate refugees at the door. Will be the largest mass migration in human history potentially. So imagining Republicans dealing with that is sort of horrifying to think about. And so there are, I think that we will reach a point when people are doing things about climate, and whether that's something that's good and, is better for most people in the country, or whether that's something totally horrifying and awful.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear the people who have been saying things related to your ICE article in these Times that was published in that. You write that the Pentagon has been writing reports about how climate change could impact U.S. defense interests since 1992, dubbing it a threat multiplier to national security. And even Defense Secretary James Mattis told the Senate Armed Services Committee that climate change is already impacting stability in areas of the world where our troops are operating today.
Where are our climate troops?
It's really interesting that the fucking Pentagon has been considering climate change a threat when you think about how many people that subscribe to a lot of things the Pentagon does deny climate change, because clearly it must be real if they're worried that it's going to affect what they're doing.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, there are really reactionary arms of the state which are hyper-materialist, which have a just very clear understanding of what is happening, what will happen. And so that's where like these sorts of reports come out of, is that they are, you know, interested in securing American interests abroad. And what that means for them in part is to look at how climate impacts will threaten military bases all over the world. And so they're, are concerned about that and are more prepared in some cases than like leftists and liberals.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just interesting because, you know, they clearly know it's real if they're preparing for it, you know.
Tanks are very bad for the environment. But these are the same people who spent all of Vietnam trying to make rain happen. So anything goes for them, you know?
That's true. They also put like bombs on bats and shit like that. So maybe they just
They're
got this one
idea
right.
men, which I respect.
That's what that CCR song was about.
But to speak to your point about, you know, this optimistic possible future versus this sort of dystopian future, I think this piece that you published, Why Abolishing ICE is a Good Climate Policy, is interesting, and I think I'm a pessimist, and I find this terrifying, but it does sort of illustrate what's happening right now that's bad, that's going to lead us away from that, which is that in a way climate change affects the way that xenophobia and all this immigration cracking down upon is sort of fueled, because what's really interesting about immigration to me is that when you ask people who are very anti-immigration, like, well, why? They sort of have these myths they believe, which is, you know, that there's this scarcity of resources, et cetera, and like why they think people are coming over the border to begin with. And a lot of this like nationalistic bullshit is like, well, it's because we have all this cool shit and we're great and their country isn't doing, you know, well enough, so they're gonna, you know, they're coming over the border to like, you know, take advantage of this hard work that we did, etc.
It's the haters make me famous.
Yeah. When in reality a lot of you know, what's happening is climate change is making parts of the world uninhabitable, which would be hilarious if it was America. You know, like if we had to move, this would be an entirely different story, right?
Well, some of us will.
Oh yeah, I mean, internal migration is going to be huge.
Yeah.
There are huge parts of the country which are going to be uninhabitable. I mean, New Orleans will be underwater.
Right.
Buy land in Denver now.
Yeah, when
This is a speculation podcast.
When I fail at comedy, I can just say I moved back to the Midwest because of climate change. It's like, oh no, it's really bad out there.
I heard it's getting warmer.
I was doing great.
It would be cool if hurricanes destroyed all the comedy clubs in New York and LA and completely restructured how this shit works. But a lot of people, you know, migrate, fleeing things that are direct byproduct of climate change that also, you know, essentially caused in large part by this country.
Okay. I'm also afraid of like all these like peripheral outcomes of climate change. Like, did you guys read about all those reindeer who got anthrax in Serbia last year?
No. What?
Did you read about it? It was fucking. So there was, the theory is that
because of the like buried.
There was a
worms?
buried reindeer,
Yeah.
and the permafrost melted, and it released anthrax into the local ecosystem, and it killed 2,000 reindeer, and also got into the water supply, and like 12 locals.
Oh yeah,
got
there's
very
all
sick.
these diseases which are buried under like layers of
Yeah,
permafrost
that we do not know about.
Yeah.
There's like a rat lungworm that surfaced in Hawaii last year.
Rat
Like-
Lungworm is my industrial band.
Yeah.
But it also is bad.
And they're killing people.
Oh, there's the monster from The Thing.
Yeah, the monster from The Thing.
Coming
I
back.
think Ivan Ooze was maybe under permafrost. Hated enemy of the Power Rangers, which I kind of blacked out and saw last weekend, and that's why I'm thinking of it.
I have a question. Reindeers are real? I thought that was just from Christmas.
Well, not
shit.
anymore.
Oh, yeah.
They can't-
They're all dead.
Oh, no. Santa Claus.
Anthrax got everyone.
They can't fly anymore. That's the difference.
Yeah. Climate change ruined Christmas.
Also, is Anthrax the heavy metal band?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Those people are fucking crazy. The The part about this article, the Abolish ICE article, that was so interesting to me is that you took a step farther than most coverage of the Abolish ICE movement is kind of looking to do online, and made an argument for abolishing DHS, which on this podcast we support.
Say hello to them, by the way.
No, DHS is sort of a monster of an agency, and I kind of go into it in this piece. I mean, it was formed as part of the mobilization for the war on terror, quote unquote.
She's quoting.
And yeah, I mean, it just combined all these agencies. And so what DHS is now contains ICE. It also contains FEMA, and it contains a lot of the disaster response infrastructure in the country. So having those various things sort of bundled together is, I think, very bad, and can't possibly be good as we enter a very climate change 21st century.
It's bad organization. I guess. So, like, if you abolish DHS and then there was no FEMA, would you just, like, make a new FEMA that's good?
I mean, that's like, that is probably something that inevitably will have to be answered if we're going to talk about abolishing all these immigration crackdown agencies. Because, okay, so I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, this sort of specter of immigration is a huge distraction from, like, the inevitable need to revamp this entire economic system. It's being sold to people as a way to sort of like continue the myths of statism and of like of nationalism and of that somehow this capitalistic system is going to reform and stop hurricanes from causing these problems, and sort of keep the push back the inevitability of climate disaster. I don't know.
Well, it's like if your whole game plan is to make the walls in your fortress higher, you're never going to address the actual problem you have with climate, which is that it's getting worse around you.
And that is probably what at least some people are going to do, is that very wealthy people will look to insulate themselves from the problems. I mean, I think they can only really do that for so long, but we're already seeing things like seasteading. It's like rich people buying like real estate 100 miles underground or something like that.
Hell yeah.
To like, have a fortress to retreat into when the seas rise too high. So people are certainly already trying to do that.
I love the name of this theory, by the way, which I can't find exactly right now, but I'm pretty sure is armored boat theory. Is that what it is?
Oh, the armed lifeboat. Yeah, my professor actually, Christian Parenti, wrote a great book called Tropic of Chaos, and it's all about sort of. By
the way.
Yeah, it's really great. And the armed lifeboat is this idea, right, that like as climate crises accelerate, as climate impacts sort of pick up, that the response will just be more violence and militarism, and that these forces of like xenophobia, of like military buildups, that they all sort of build on each other to create this really horrifying convergence of things.
To that point, I found what I was looking for just now. A quote from your article. This one the fucking thesaurus this guy was using when he wrote this quote is like making me laugh. So from your article, to quote you, it says, "Indeed, much of the academic and policy literature around climate change and security posits migrating populations, those from the global south especially, as a threat. In The Coming Anarchy, renowned political scientist Robert Kaplan argues that environmental changes will force respectable nations to defend themselves on a," and here's the quote I was looking for, it's from this guy's book, The Coming Anarchy, "run-down, crowded planet of skinhead Cossacks and juju warriors, influenced by the worst refuse of Western pop culture and ancient tribal hatreds, and battling over scraps of overused earth in guerrilla conflicts that ripple across continents."
I am Ozymandias. Marvel at my works.
Hell yeah. You sound like Rorschach or something.
Yeah, what the fuck?
I don't know.
New
It's
rule.
amazing.
If you're a Cossack, you gotta have hair.
Yeah.
Some Mad Max shit, dude.
Juju warriors.
This is like fan fiction.
Yeah.
I can't tell if from the title of The Coming Anarchy it's like a scary anarchy label or like anarchy. Everyone's gonna have spray paint.
I think he's freaked out. I think
No.
he's like, no.
It's
no
bad
good.
anarchy.
Yeah.
He's anti-Juju warrior, which is a term I've never heard before in my life.
Okay, to sort of round this out, I think we should talk about how these issues sort of affect the future of the left and the ways that the neoliberal establishment is going to sort of try to fuck us over with them, particularly in regards to what happened with Big Dick Tom Perez, fresh off his DJ set at Aussie Fest.
I never want to think about that.
He's a DJ now. You have to.
Yeah. Tom Perez, as we touched on earlier, basically, spearheaded this thing where, by the way, the title of this is so pornographic. This Intercept article: DNC pretends respect for workers requires it to take corporate PAC money from big oil. I don't know why. Like in all caps, I was like, "Am I on Pornhub right now?" Take that corporate PAC money.
Stepsister PAC, loaded to the gills.
But yeah, as we touched on earlier, there's basically this suddenly, walking back, unrolling of a policy where the DNC wouldn't accept PAC money, and Tom Perez tries to sell it as this thing that's being like, oh, it's pro-worker. It's because we want workers to be able to form unions and be able to influence our candidates, but it includes PACs. It's just
that's the only thing it affects, right? Right. So some quick backstory is that in June, the DNC passed a rule that they wouldn't accept donations from corporate PACs. That's it, from corporate PACs linked to fossil fuel corporations in particular. And so when they issued this policy, when Tom Perez brought this proposal to walk back that rule, he made it seem as if that initial ban on corporate PACs had also included a ban on union PACs, a ban on union members donating to the DNC. It didn't include any of that. And so the only thing that rule did was ban corporate PACs. And so he frames it, this walk back, as like this pro-worker, like these union members really just want to donate to the DNC, which I'm sure so many union members are like gearing up to donate to the DNC.
Coal unions are lining up to support the Democrats.
Yeah, and this is like a sort of newly coined phenomenon called astroturfing, which is something that you saw them try to do recently in DC with this whole restaurant bill, where they tried to make it seem like there's this movement of workers that were like, no, we want the tip system. We don't want the minimum wage raised. Right. By framing it as a populist movement, I think they're trying to trick people that are just vaguely aware of this sort of burgeoning left in America into voting for it because they think like, oh, this is Ocasio, this is Bernie,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
We got the email list.
And the slightly complicated thing about this is that my sense from it, and this is a little bit of speculation on my part, is that there are very conservative building trades unions which do build pipelines, which are deeply linked into fossil fuel interests, who I fully believe came to the DNC and said, will you walk this back? Because they see their interests as aligned with those of the fossil fuel company. And so there is a sense where there are, there is a I think, fairly small subsection of labor which is interested in furthering the interest of the fossil fuel industry.
Sure.
But as if to frame that as if that is like the labor movement, quote unquote, which the DNC has tried to do, is just absurd because it's like unions.
Those few coal guys that Trump likes to trot out all the time and go like, see, these unions love me, right? It's like a specific situation that it really isn't like indicative of the concept of labor,
right? Or that or that environmental progress, doing anything about climate change, is counteractive to the interests of workers, which is totally
right.
It's the opposite of that.
It's like the "I have a friend" of speculation. Like the I have a friend who works in a oil union, and he lives in Canada, but everyone up there is lining up to give us money, and it's so sad because their girlfriends are there too, and you'll never meet them, but they want to make America good.
Cool. All right. Should we?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Kate, again, thanks for coming on. Is there anything you'd like to plug on our wonderful podcast?
I don't think so. Thank you for having me. I have nothing to hawk.
Like
I wish I did.
People follow you on Twitter, maybe?
Oh, sure. You can follow me on Twitter if you want.
At
just my name, Kate Aronoff.
Got it.
I do it. It's cool. Following Kate on Twitter.
Cool. If this comes out by this weekend, which it should, I should probably get it up tonight. I'll be at El Cortez in Bushwick opening for my friend's band. They're called Too Bad. They're from Gainesville. Should be about 7, 8 o'clock. It's on my pinned tweet. If I don't get killed in a hurricane or a tornado or something by then.
El Cortez has very good nachos as well.
Oh, good.
I want that on the record.
Good to know. Anything for you?
Yes. Okay, follow me on Twitter at PatakJokes, and my timeline's going to get good any minute now. I'll only be retweeting Ice-T. And then and I bet it will come out before September 1st. We are having the next paid protest DSA fundraiser comedy show at Mayday Space at 7, and we're fundraising for the housing working group this time. So
Hell yeah.
cool stuff. Come on down. And that's all I got.
All right.
Does everybody have a limerick?
I was thinking about doing like a what's the worst kind of natural disaster to die in, but I think we've reached the end of this podcast.
Fire.
All right, well, you heard it here. Fire.
Vote no on fire.
Thanks again, Kate, for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, the damned, good night or good morning. I don't know when you guys sleep.
We're going to work on that.
You fucking go.
Okay. Y'all getting real hype right now. It's just about to get real, isn't it, Pat? I want to taste it, baby. Let's go.